Firefighters in Spain and France are racing to contain raging fires as Europe braces for a new heat wave starting today. More than 300,000 people have been forced to evacuate, with entire communities left in the path of the flames. Around the Spanish capital, Madrid, separate fires have scorched an estimated 770 square kilometers, an area larger than the city itself. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez warns how deadly the climate emergency is.
Lo que estamos viviendo no es una sucesión de episodios aislados, es, se ha dicho antes, la expresión más dolorosa de una emergencia climática que hace de los incendios de sexta generación más voraces, las olas de calor más frecuentes y nuestro territorio, en consecuencia, más vulnerable. Ya no es una excepción, es la regla en sí misma, veranos cada vez más difíciles, destructivos y, por tanto, mortíferos.
In France, the worst-hit region is Gironde, near the city of Bordeaux. President Emmanuel Macron has held an emergency meeting on the response.
On fera tous les retours d'expérience, et je m'en porte garant, pour continuer de s'améliorer comme on l'a fait à chaque crise. Mais on a anticipé collectivement. Il y a eu un très gros travail qui a été fait, la nation a réinvesti dans tous les domaines civils, militaires. Mais au moment où on se parle, il faut qu'on soit unis et en action. Il y a des femmes et des hommes qui risquent tout pour protéger, qui se battent contre le feu. Tout ce qu'on doit faire, c'est les aider.
William Denslow followed this report for CNA from Liège, near the front lines of the fire in southwestern France.
Scenes like this of charred trees, an all too familiar sight in this region. According to officials, more than 40,000 hectares of land lost to this wildfire, and for the year at large, over 100,000 hectares are lost by various fires. That just shows the scale of what firefighters are up against. It seems that their defences are working. On Sunday, we saw firsthand some of those efforts, felling trees, removing brush, that ammunition that the fire has used to burn across this region of southwest France. They are creating these blockades to stop the fire more or less in its tracks. Overnight, officials say that there wasn't any significant growth in this fire due to conditions. Currently, they say now is an opportunity to really try and make inroads in getting this fire under control. However, major challenges persist. The winds remain a major problem, and temperatures only expected to rise throughout the week. This is an exceptional fire that authorities are dealing with because of the dryness of the conditions, the heat as well. And French officials do describe it as an unprecedented situation.
Il a sa propre vie, il profite à la fois des conditions climatiques et de la consistance de ses forêts pour avoir un comportement qui est complètement erratique. Il est autonome, il s'auto-alimente, il part un peu dans tous les sens.
Authorities say that the fire remains at the gates of the city of Bordeaux. The mayor warning that they're preparing for all scenarios. Big questions about whether there'll be evacuations needed there. But, of course, for the wider region, so many tens of thousands of people already been forced to leave their homes, and plenty of uncertainty for them as to what comes next.
Les informations pour savoir quand est-ce qu'on va rentrer, ça c'est un gros problème. Nous venions pour 24 heures en passé, et maintenant ça va faire 48 heures, peut-être 72 heures, peut-être plus. Donc on va voir, on s'adaptera au jour le jour.
Well, focus here remains on getting this blaze under control, something authorities warn could take weeks, if not months, to fully achieve. Real questions about what comes next. Already, senior French officials have described the economic impact on this region of southwest France as likened to a clap of thunder. Questions now on what can be done to mitigate the impacts of wildfires for the coming months and also the coming years. We've heard from senior officials in the European Union saying that simply Europe is unprepared for the conditions it is now facing, a continent that is warming faster than any other. For CNA, I'm William Denslow in Gironde, France.
For more on these raging wildfires, let's speak to Craig Clements. He's professor and director of the Wildfire Interdisciplinary Research Center at San Jose State University. Professor, thanks for making the time to speak with us today. These images that we've been seeing out of the out-of-control blazes in Europe, they're just jaw-dropping. From what you've seen, how intense is this wildfire season in Europe compared to previous years?
Well, this is one of the worst on record because of the conditions that are playing out. Because of the wind, the drought, and the heat waves, this has been really, really difficult for fire management agencies in Europe.
So is the scale of the disaster unusual or unexpected?
Well, given the fact that there were 3 heat waves throughout the spring and early summer, drying out fuels very, very quickly, and the onset of strong winds and erratic winds, this is not something that would be shocking in anywhere else in the world, but in this part of Europe, it is. And so the way fire weather and fire danger work is the fact that you have very, very dry fuels, you have weather conditions that are conducive to propagating fires, and when you have all that lined up, this is what plays out time and time again.
So has that been the reason why it's so difficult to bring these fires under control? Help us understand the conditions that firefighters would be facing on the ground.
Well, in these types of situations, it's very common in the Mediterranean climates to have very dry fuels, so shrubs and trees that are very easy to ignite. And when that happens, you get a lot of heat release. And when you have erratic winds, which has been the weather pattern for the last week, that causes the fire to go in different directions and causing the development of what's called pyrocumulonimbus. So these are thunderstorms that are generated from the fire plumes themselves. And then that can actually lead to more erratic conditions, which is very, very difficult to contain the fires. In addition to the fact that this part of France 20 years ago were reducing their firefighting capabilities. Most of Europe is unprepared for wildfire increases in the future because they don't have the technology, the analytics, and the capability to fight these types of fires. And this is played out in the Western United States, where we have built up the technology to do that, particularly in California, where I'm at.
So what do governments in Europe need to do to make sure they're better prepared, as you're saying?
One thing is to have analytics or analysis of the conditions on the ground. Includes a suite of instrumentation that is measuring the weather conditions at many locations throughout the mountains, the valleys, all around, an integrated network of observations, high-resolution satellite information, and have this information available to fire management agencies. That gives us an idea. That'll give the fire management agencies an idea of what the risk will be in the future, in the next day and such. But then we need firefighting capabilities. So lots of aircraft, lots of fire crews that are, capable with these to handle these big fires.
Officials have warned that the fires could burn for months. How can we predict how long the wildfires will last?
Well, one thing about fire behavior, it's a function of day-to-day weather conditions. So, for example, if it's really, really hot and windy, that's like the worst case example, the worst case situation. But then if the weather changes and it becomes cooler and maybe there's some rain, precipitation, that can actually change the fire conditions and make it easier to control the fire. So if it's forecasted to be hot and dry for the next few weeks, it's going to be very, very challenging. And residents and communities are going to be on alert for that period until the weather changes.
Help us understand, what are the impacts of such a prolonged fire season?
Well, what we've seen in California and parts of the western U.S. as you continue having dry, warm weather, the fuels continue being very receptible for ignition. And So if there are fires, they're going to continue to burn depending on the resources available to put those fires out. If there's lots of resources, then you can contain the fire fairly quickly. But if it's going to be like a month-long heat wave or multiple weeks, then that puts a lot of strain on the fire management agencies to put more crews out, to get more aircraft out. And so one thing that can be done is to help the residents understand that this is what's going to be in place, making sure that housing is up to date and that fuels are removed and mitigated around communities. That could actually be done in advance.
You'd mentioned the soaring temperatures, the dry conditions, the strong winds, the thunderstorms. What else could be contributing to the intensifying heat that's fueling these fires?
Well, one thing that, the big elephant in the room is climate change. As we have a warmer world, we are drying out the fuels, things are hotter, we're having record-breaking temperatures. And so that causes these fuels to be more arid, which causes them to be easier to ignite. And another thing is that fires, many fires are naturally caused by lightning, but most fires are human caused. And so if we can reduce the ignitions, then we wouldn't have the fire problem. So there's a lot of things that residents can do by being very careful, making sure you do not ignite a fire, and clearing fuels around your home. So this is something that has to be done day in and day out for the next, month or so.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing your insights with us. We were speaking to Craig Clements, Professor and Director of the Wildfire Interdisciplinary Research Center at San Jose State University.